We are very excited that Dr. Bruce Yandle is going to be presenting today. He is very loved on this campus, well respected by his colleagues, and he is the Dean Emeritus of Clemson University's College of Business and Behavioral Science. His topic today is Town and Gown, a vital partnership in the new knowledge economy. Dr. Bruce Yandle is a consultant, writer, and speaker on economics and political economy. He is the Emeritus Center Distinguished Adjunct Professor of Economics at George Mason University and participates regularly in the Center's Capitol Hill Lecture Series. Dr. Yandle is a Dean Emeritus of Clemson University's College of Business and Behavioral Science and Senior Fellow in Property and Environment Research Center in Bozeman, Montana. While serving as Alumni Distinguished Professor of Economics at Clemson University, he taught in graduate programs in France, Italy, Germany, the Czech Republic, and he is the author, editor of 17 books. You are busy. Including his forthcoming co-authored Cato Institute book, Bootleggers and Baptists, Understanding America's Regulatory Journey. That sounds like a great case study. Dr. Yandle served in Washington on 2 occasions, first as a senior economist on the White House staff during the Ford administration, and later as executive director of the Federal Trade Commission in the Reagan administration. Dr. Yandle was member and chairman of the South Carolina State Board of Economic Advisors, member chairman of the Spartanburg Methodist College Board of Trustees, and member of the trustees of the members of the trustees of the Foundation of Economic Education. In 2012, he received the Adam Smith Award for the Association of Private Enterprise Education for his career-long leadership in promoting the free market economy. Prior to entering an academic career, Dr. Yandle was in the industrial machinery business for 15 years. His quarterly economic situation report is distributed by Clemson University's Strom Thurmond Institute and George Mason University's Center. So if you will, please, I just want to let you know he sent me the report. And it will be uploaded to our website by Manley. So if he's going to mention the report, just know that we have it and we're updating it and we're uploading it to the website. Please join us with a warm welcome for Dr. Yandle.
Thank you very much. Wonderful being with you this morning. What a beautiful day, and I've certainly enjoyed this conference. I have to tell you, I've been to a lot of conferences in my day, and I'm sure you have as well. This is one of the best ones I've attended. In terms of, and I'm talking about content and enthusiasm and positive thoughts. I was talking with Beth earlier. The time is right for ITGA. You're creating value. You're creating wealth, making things better across a wide spectrum. I knew this was really going to be a special morning. This morning when I got up early and went out to get the paper, Dot and I live in a part of Clemson that is called Old Calhoun. We live right across the railroad tracks from the train station. Now, only 2 nuts, or people who love trains, would live where we live. There are 20 trains that come through our town in a 24-hour period, and we love every one of them. We live in an old house. There are not many old houses in Clemson. Our house is a little better than 100 years old, and we bought it. We like old houses. Right up the street from us is a fraternity house, wonderful bunch of guys. We like students. There's student housing all around us. But every now and then, there's someone who gets a little bit exuberant, maybe enjoying a celebration of learning. And they come by and they knock our mailbox off the post. So this morning when I went out to get the paper, there was a mailbox in the ditch. And I thought, this is really going to be a good day. That happens, but we love it. We love being here. We love being with students, and they get exuberant at times, and occasionally we do too. The guys at the fraternity house up the street are wonderful. When they're going to have a party, which may spill out into the lawn and who knows, spill out into the streets. They come and they bring a note to us, put it in our mailbox, not just to us, other people along the way, saying, before you call the police, please call us. And so they're good, they are good neighbors. Now, but I have to warn you, I was teaching a class about this time a number of years ago. I had a habit at the time. How many of you remember blackboards and chalk? All right, so this was a long time ago, but I had a habit of coming into my classroom maybe 5 minutes early, and I would outline my lecture on the first panel of the blackboard. And then as the lecture was given and the discussion unfolded, I would check off the items, and I would have a box at the bottom, coming attractions, do this before we meet again. And there was a student who would come in at about the same time I would, about 5 minutes ahead of class, sat on the front row. I would be outlining my lecture. He'd put his arm down on his desk, put his head on his arm, and go to sleep. And we'd sleep through the entire class. And then when class ended, he'd shake himself and head off. And after that happened 3 or 4 times, first part of the semester, I went over to him and I said, look, son, I put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, look, son, it's obvious that you need sleep. Don't feel like you need to come to class. Just stay in your dormitory room or your apartment, catch up on your sleep, and then we can catch up on this course later. He said, but Professor Yandle, I can sleep so much better when you're talking. Now that student he earned an F that semester. Earned a solid F. Not many people do that because you can drop a course while passing and all that stuff, but he slept through the semester, earned a solid F, and about 2 or 3 years later, here he comes again. He'd gotten caught up in his sleep. And so things were going okay. Now, you're the experts on town and gown. I just happened to live in a town and at one time wore a gown, but you're the experts on town and gown. I cannot trump your expertise. I'm learning. Had some wonderful sessions that I've attended. If I can claim any expertise, it's looking at larger patterns of human activity as they attempt to create order and peace and wealth and happiness. Whereas the destination of the study of economics is happiness. Some people think it's making money. That's just a way station for some people. And so I look at patterns, and what I've attempted to do in preparing my presentation is to reflect on some of the fine details of what's going on in your world and in my world, and then try to fit it into the larger patterns that are occurring around us. A theme that I will bump into along the way is this one. University and college students are the most underutilized resource in the American economy. The most underutilized resource in the American economy. Human beings are the ultimate resource. The human mind is the ultimate resource. And we've got millions of these minds and brains walking around on legs and with arms and eyes, and they're not always engaged, and they often want to be. And so it's that underutilized resource that I want to sort of bring to the fore as we are talking this morning and looking at some images together. Now, of course, that's a beautiful image of our campus, and as we think about this, and as I was listening to some sessions this week, the last couple of days, you get it. In other words, I'm not delivering saying, oh boy, I never thought of that before, but it's going on. And so what I'm urging is that you expand the template of the town and gown relationship. Expand and enrich that template, and that's being done too at various places. Make it a richer template that will include more activities, more collaboration, more engagement. Now, as I sat in a session the other day and listened to the folks from Northwest Missouri University, State University, talk about their Mozinga Lake project and utilizing teams of students from marketing to develop brand, marketing ideas, advertising ideas, and what a wonderful story it was, what a successful story it was. When I listened to the folks from Cal Poly talking about their immediate undergraduate graduate program where they are organizing startup businesses in an incubator with all kinds of things happening. That's what I'm talking about. It's that kind of thing. When I heard the discussion yesterday from the folks from Rock Hill, South Carolina, and from Winthrop University talking about their knowledge park, that's going well beyond the traditional town and gown relationship. That's what I'm talking about. And it's at a time of great need that we do this. It's not a luxury that we do this. It's a time of great need. There's some incredible things taking place in our world. Most people do not realize, because they don't have a reason to be looking at the data, most people do not realize that the largest economic boom that has ever occurred in human history is occurring right now. The largest economic boom that has ever occurred in human history is occurring right now. Now, we get all the bad news at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, and there's plenty of that. But we never get that news. I'm talking about the world. I'm not talking about the United States. We are not participating in that boom. But it's the largest boom that has ever occurred. If the rate of growth of the world economy continues at its current pace, which is not unusual, 3.5% annually, if it continues at its current pace for the next 30 years, and it likely will, per capita world income will rise 50%. 50% in the next 30 years. We have more people coming out of poverty than at any time in history. The boom is so big that in the next 30 years, there will be more stuff, more services produced than has been produced cumulatively since we first started measuring world output. That's what's going on. Now, I want you to visualize a map of the world. And I want you to visualize coloring countries blue, where there's a high pace of economic activity. Color them mustard if it's slow. And by the way, our most recent GDP growth here for the first quarter was negative 1% for the U.S. Our growth in per capita real disposable income is negative in the first quarter. We're getting poorer. But that's an outlier. That's not what's going on. But that's the winter of this year. But now think about that map of the world. Mustard if you're not growing very much at all. Blue if you're going great guns. All of the developed world is mustard. The United States, Canada, all of Europe. Let's call that the old world. It's mustard. Slow growth, very wealthy, positive growth. All of the rest of the world is light blue or dark blue, with the exception of Syria, Iraq, Argentina, Suriname. Those are the exceptions. The rest's blue. That's the world. And so getting connected to that world is what is so critically important. Now, while that is occurring, let's get back to the United States. We are also experiencing some incredible times. Unbelievable in a way. Even though we've got slow growth, even though we had negative growth in this first quarter of the year, and it'll pick up as we go forward, and we'll probably have better than 2% before this year is up, even though that is there, the pace of change is so fast. Our modern technology now is dated 2006. It's the iPhone. The iPhone and iPad technologies, not just for communication and for your and my use, those are now becoming elements of machinery, elements of operations. And there's a new one coming out. And so it's exponential change. The pace is so fast that a couple of really interesting authors at MIT have turned out a recent book called The Second Machine Age. Another book is titled The Third Industrial Revolution. But then there's another book that is entitled Average is Over. The point is, it's really going to be hard for somebody who's average to be an important part in the future economy, in the future life of the nation. And so those are some of the times. And so I say all that to sort of introduce the title. We need each other. When I say we, I'm speaking about town and gown. We need each other. And in the parts of my presentation, to elaborate on this, first to talk about portals of prosperity and happiness, which I have already brushed up against. Gates that lead to prosperity and happiness with respect to the interaction of town and gown. And then the world, which I have already brushed up against, the U.S., and gale winds of uncertainty that are affecting both town and gown, and then last, the knowledge economy opportunities. About 10 years ago, I began studying what I call the knowledge economy, and there are a lot of other people looking at it. And some of that work that I did was done with students as we explored, gathered data, and identified where the knowledge economy was in the United States, which states, and then looking inside some states, which counties. Where is the knowledge economy coming? And so I want to get to some of that as we talk together. Now, before launching into this, I want to express some appreciation to some people. As I was preparing this, a colleague of mine who is at Presbyterian College in Clinton, South Carolina, assisted me in the research. What I asked Jerry to do was, I said, help me make a gigantic literature scan. I'm talking about newspaper articles, magazine articles about town and gown, new issues facing higher education, new issues facing cities. And so I got a gigantic box of copies of articles and notes from Jerry. I want to thank the Town and Gown Committee of Clemson. They were very hospitable to me. I had never been to a meeting before, and I thought, well, gee whiz, if I'm going to stand up and talk about town and gown, by golly, I should go to one of the meetings. And I did, and I learned a lot there. And I also want to express a special note of thanks to Jeff Martin, who is here at Clemson, because Jeff has studied this relationship a long time, written widely on it, had a special session here. But Jeff introduced me to some concepts, provided me with some books and materials that helped me to get a better image. But the point is, we need brains. We need brains. Those machines that enable us to think, to create, to innovate. We need brains, but we don't just need brains. That's the old business of universities and colleges, educating people, turning out brains. They walk across the stage every May or June. But we need brains that are engaged. We can grow them, we can move them, we can attract them, but can we get them engaged? Engaged is the word. And it's just not engagement, it's engagement with the world. What's going on out there? How can we get a leg up on it? How can we get engaged? And to get engaged with the world requires this culture of collaboration that we have been talking about here for the last few days. Well, how do you get collaboration? How do you get these people talking to each other? And successful engagement and collaboration cannot take place until you have trust. In a way, Jeff, it gets back to your presentation about using the metaphor of marriage as the relationship, enlightening the relationship between town and gown. How do you get trust? You earn it. You build relationships. You keep promises. You deliver. You don't get trust between cities and universities. You get trust between people who are associated with cities and universities. It's a human thing. And so if we can get trust, then we can get some collaboration. And from the university or college's standpoint, the big question that I'm posing is right here. How can we produce, package, and share world-tested knowledge? How can we get students and faculty to get more engaged and build an innovative culture and do that while reducing our costs? That's the College of City Challenge. And from the town, how do we attract young professionals? And I must tell you, if you live in a town that is not attracting young professionals to live in your town is not going anywhere. It may be a wonderful town, and it may be a wonderful town for a long time, but it's not going anywhere. And so the challenge is, how do we attract young professionals to come and be a part of our community? How do we get new capital to come? How can we become a part of the knowledge economy? And the most important part of this statement is, how do we become cool? And I'm not talking about North Dakota. North Dakota is cold in the winter and cool. All right. As my granddaughter would say, how do you get to be way cool, dude? That's the big challenge, because it will be the cool places that will attract the young professionals who want to live in the town, who want a vital place in a community. And so here's the town side of this thing. How do we do that and avoid raising our taxes? You know, you can figure out a way to do a lot of these things if you can just keep raising your taxes and bring in more revenue. Well, Town and Gown has been opening up gates and portals and walls that separate towns and from colleges for decades. And so here's this wonderful process that has already been developed in some places, in lots of places, not developed at all in others. But you're known for this. This is your brand. But as you reduce the costs for interaction and do it so well, in other words, how can we expand this thing? Now, what I'm showing you here is Michael Fix's model. This is the traditional model of the town and gown relationship. And as you look at this traditional model, you'll see things that are very familiar. One of those balls says downtown. What can we do about downtown? Another one says cultural activities. Let's interact to have some cultural activities. Another one says municipal services. How can we promote municipal services? Volunteerism in the community. And then housing, police, safety. These are the traditional balls. And in Fix's work, he expands it, and I'm adding to it. How do you get research, as they're doing at Rutgers, so that now you have student research teams that are funded by the university doing things that involve the town? How do you get that? How do you get a knowledge park added onto this? How do you get what are called clinical faculty at universities and colleges? Now, clinical faculty are people who know how to do things. All right. Those are people from, quote, the real world. These are the folks who come in and sit and teach, co-teach every senior level course taught at the Colorado School of Mines in engineering and sciences. Every course is team taught by someone from industry and science and a faculty member. That's a clinical faculty. When the folks from Northwest Missouri State were talking about the marketing project, which was so successful for them, two guys from the city went to the campus every week, and they were in the classroom. That's clinical faculty. And so you add that ball, and we can think of other things that could be added. How do you get this knowledge economy going? That's the larger template that I want you to think about. Now, a key element of this is engagement, the word engagement. I did a scan as I was preparing these comments, just a very quick scan on the web, and I put in Vice President of Engagement with Google. And here's the stuff that I began to get back from colleges and universities. I may have spent 30 minutes doing this, and you can see the sample there. Well, the University of Chicago has a vice president for world engagement. And then I met Kim Keel, who is from Winthrop. She's the vice president for community engagement. The word engagement is now showing up frequently on the university side of this. It's recognized that if we are going to create wealth at a lower cost and get these brains working, engagement is what we're talking about. Well, when did it start? When did this process start? And I'm not talking about when did Town and Gown start. When did this process, this human process start? And the best estimate that we have is that it started 250,000 years ago. It's been going on a long time. In some community in Africa, anthropologists, scientists, and others have identified the general location where human beings first were able to produce and live beyond what might be explained by their biological capabilities. They were getting wealthier. Life was getting easier. they had more nutrition. In a very rudimentary way, 250,000 years ago, we might say human flourishing was just getting started. And as they seek to explain it, then they say, well, what was it that happened 250,000 years ago? What was going on that would explain this initiative of flourishment? It was engagement. It was trade. Engaging with some other people from somewhere else who were better at doing something than you were, and they brought some of their stuff to your village, and you gave them some of your stuff. And as they say, both parties were better off after the transaction than they were before. But as this story is told, and the Rational Optimist is the book that tells the story by Matt Ridley, as Matt tells the story, he says, well, that sounds pretty good, but the more important thing was not the goods, it was ideas. Ideas came from somewhere else to my village. Things I'd never thought about. And he says, that's dangerous. That's dangerous because there are a lot of people who say, I'm pulling up the gangplank. I don't want any of those wild ideas coming in and upsetting the apple cart. But 250,000 years ago, as Matt Ridley terms it, progress was made in connecting to the collective brain of mankind. The collective brain of mankind. Now that's been going on for 250,000 years. I was with a friend last night for dinner and he says, Bruce, are you tweeting? I said, no, I'm not tweeting. He says, you've got to start tweeting. You've got to start tweeting. And I said, why? He says, so that you can get connected to the human brain. There are all kinds of thoughts that are out there. And there are powerful things that I become aware of that points me in different directions. All right, that's part of the process. And we have gotten to the point now where the cost of sending a message has fallen to zero, to send a message to another human being. If there were a way for us to connect the brains in this room so that they all got connected and we could pose a question, think what kinds of answers we would get, and that's what a convention is all about, is that kind of connectivity. And so we go back 250,000 years ago. Now the wonderful thing about higher education, as we think about what's going on in the world and what's going on in your world, those of you from the higher education part, it's a booming industry. And so congratulations. You're a part of a booming industry. And you say, well, I haven't seen it over my way. Well, there are always differential effects, but this is the overall picture. This is enrollments. I'm showing you data here for enrollments in private and public universities. The data here is from 1970 to 2010. Look at it. It's exploding. I mean, anybody who's in any industry would love for their industry to look like that. They would say, good lands, I'll have to really try to be a failure in a world like that. Well, that's enrollment there. This is enrollments in two-year colleges, tech schools, community colleges. Look at it. Talk about a boom. Talk about people wanting your product. Woo, you got it made. Say, but you haven't seen the red ink, have you? There's more to the story. This is enrollments in online courses. It's just going. Students, young people, old people, they want to Twitter, they want to tweet, they want knowledge, they want to get connected. The ideas. This is the production of degrees. At the top is bachelor's degrees. Then you see degrees that are coming from masters, associates. It's a booming output. These are earnings. As compared to a high school diploma, a person getting a bachelor's degree now, on average, I never was there, it was below. All right. On average, that person will have an additional $1 million in earnings over a lifetime. You're creating millionaires on average. The difference between a high school diploma and a bachelor's degree has never been larger. So, wow, think about what kind of industry you're in. Booming, yes, but it's conditioned by social and economic forces, so it's not happening everywhere. Let's talk about what is going on. You can't see the fine detail on this map, but you can certainly get an understanding of what's on the map. This is a map of the United States. This is county data. The year is 1970. Do you see those mustard-colored counties? All of the mustard-colored counties have an average number of adults with a college education equal to the nation. Equal to the nation. If you're a mustard color, you're equal to the nation. In 1970, that was 11 out of 100, 11% had a bachelor's degree. If you're lighter than mustard, you're lighter than the nation. If you're darker than mustard, you got more than the nation. You got the picture? West of the Mississippi River, it's just sort of a sea of mustard. East of the Mississippi River, it's sort of gray with some very dark pools in some counties as you go across the country. That's 1970. That's 2000. That's 2000. That's 30 years later. Now there are 21 out of 100 that have a bachelor's degree. Well, what happened to all the mustard? Most of the counties turned pale or dark, and a number of them turned dark. We had one of the largest migrations that has occurred in our country's history, and the migration involved brains. Where did they go? Why did they go? Where did they go? That's where they went. They went to cities, by and large, attracted to cities, and rural areas began to empty out, and the brains agglomerated. They wanted to be with other brains and other kinds of activities. This chart here takes the picture there. That was October of 2012 when NASA did that photograph. And this chart is a part that Richard Florida, a very well-known sociologist, took that data and said, okay, I'm going to identify major economies in the United States. And the one where you and I are located is called Charlanta. We're in Charlanta. Charlotte, Atlanta defines that economy. And if you were to stare at this for a long time, you would see that that's the fourth largest economy in the United States, Charlanta. You can see the sizes of the circles. Charlanta is a little larger than the Northern California, San Francisco area, about the same size as Southern California, Mexico, just to give you an idea. And then you see those great big circles up there around Chicago and New York. And so people move to the cities by and large. Now here's where university students are located. The bigger the circle, the larger the number of students. The big circle is 1 million students, university students. And so the brains moved to cities and towns, away from rural areas, by and large, always with exceptions. And then attendance and expansions began to take place in those cities so that now we have, when I talked about underutilized resources, look at those circles where you've got 1 million brains that are operating there. But now the question, once they graduate, where do they go? Do they stay? And what is it that causes them to move? I mentioned the research that I was involved with, still am, started about 10 years ago, and this was the question that we were probing. What is it that explains the choices of locations of young people, 25 to 39 years old, with a bachelor's degree and not married, the most mobile people in our society? That was the data that we were working with. 25 to 39, bachelor's degree equipped, single. What is it that would explain? What are the magnets that would attract these people to your town, to your state? And so we did a lot of statistical modeling, and we learned a little bit as we did that. One of the first things that attracts them are people like them. So the more people you have, 25 to 39 years old, with bachelor's degrees and single, the more want to come to your city. And so, you're chasing your tail in a sense. They despise taxes. The higher the taxes in your town, when we looked at MSA data, or state, the fewer of these people will come, other things being equal. They were not attracted by income. That is, when you put the per capita income of the town or state in, that coefficient is not statistically significant. That's not Wilson. But the big one, cool. Cool. Richard Florida did his book, The Creative Class. He developed an index that I call the cool index. It's a number. He's got cool indexes for metropolitan areas. He's got cool indexes for states. We put his cool index into our equations, and that begins to explain an important part of the variation in this data. We updated this study, and we looked from 2000 to 2008. We looked at the location choices for people who move from other countries to the United States, that immigration factor, and then we looked at choices made by people who move among the states from one state to another. Cool mattered a lot for domestics. Cool did not matter a lot for the international movers. But there's a measure of freedom that is produced. There are several producers of measures of freedom, economic freedom, personal freedom, overall freedom, that mattered a lot to the internationals. There's an element in the cool index that mattered for them. And that part of the index has a measurement of the degree to which a community is accepting of people who have different religions, who have skin of a different color from the majority, who have a sexual orientation that is different from the norm of the community. Florida has an index. And our study shows that those communities that were open and embracing of people generally, got people generally. And so we know something about. Then we extended our study to go beyond people who are single, just everybody who's 25 to 39 years old, whether they have bachelor's degrees or not. And we got the same thing, similar kinds of results. But the cool part is the part that is important for town and gown. As we think about broadening this template, how do you get to be cool? Music, arts, theater, good restaurants, a place to get a good beer, wine bars, sidewalks that are fun to be on, safety. I don't worry when I come out of the bar at 1 o'clock in the morning or come out of a restaurant at 1 o'clock in the morning. Tomorrow I will be talking with people in North Augusta, South Carolina. It's a town just across the river from Augusta, Georgia. They are building their plan for the future for their town on the basis of university students. They don't have a university in North Augusta. But right across the Savannah River, there's the Medical University of Georgia. There's Augusta State University. And at Fort Gordon, there's a major unit of higher education for the Army that has 3,000, what's the equivalent of 3,000 university students. As I talked with them the other day, and I said, tell me some of the things you're doing. And it was fascinating. We are building, you can imagine, we're building a river walk. We're going to get some restaurants. We've already got them lined up that are going to be coming in and so forth. And I said, what are you doing for safety? We're going to have a separate police force, 24/7, on white bicycles with white uniforms, so that if anybody wants to come out at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and walk on the river walk, they won't have to worry about their safety. And I said, well, how are they going to get across the river? Your students on one side of the river, you're on the other. We're going to have a water taxi. It reminded me of what we heard yesterday about Winthrop and the Knowledge Park. We're going to put in a streetcar. That's their dream. That is what they are working on. I told him about what happened in Fort Worth, Texas. The downtown of Fort Worth was just decaying like the downtown of many cities. There are universities, beaucoup of them, right around Fort Worth. The Hunt brothers, who don't hurt for money, bought the downtown. They bought all those decrepit buildings, and then they began to renovate them. And one of the first things they built was a children's theater. and put it in what had been the most crime-ridden part of the city, a children's theater that would have productions that would end maybe at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, or maybe 10, maybe at the latest for the children. But what did they do? They hired their own police force, put them in white uniforms, put them on bicycles. They wanted to make certain that no mother with a 10-year-old coming out of a theater at 10 o'clock at night would have anything to be worried about. And so these are the things that begin to make you cool, and it takes everything. But in a sense, what it ultimately takes, and it was the case with Greenville, South Carolina, just up the road from us, as I spoke with them a number of years ago, when we were attempting to get Clemson curricular and degree programs located on Main Street, which has happened now, they said, our city is really neat, we're cool, we're a destination city, we've got 50 restaurants and a lot of good things going on, but what we don't have are university students. We want to have university students walking these sidewalks. We have business people coming in, engineers, investors, and when they come to our city, they say, where are the university students? We want to be cool, town and gown. Well, as we think about these things, I'll skip that, I'm showing you population growth, but let me brush up against it. When we said, where are the people going, you can look at this chart later, but this is population growth recent for the United States. The red line going through is the population growth for the nation, 1.7. The fastest growing state in the U.S. is not a state at all. It's the District of Columbia. The second fastest growing state is North Dakota. All right, go, go, go. And so you can look down the chart at where people are going, and that's where these young people are going as well. Then if we look at the gain and the share of the adult population with a bachelor's degree, you can see the states that are not gaining, they are below the national level, and the states that are gaining, I'm happy to say South Carolina is number 5 in the nation in terms of the share of the adult population with a bachelor's degree. Great strides have been made. But you look over there at North Dakota, and you look over there at South Dakota, hey, lots of good things going on. This is data that you can look at later if you are interested, or if you have trouble sleeping at night, get out these slides. And it's better than PM. All right, guaranteed, it's cheaper. But let's talk about the gale winds that you're facing. You know, here's the background with the economy and some things that are going on with cool cities and young people and what might be ideas for expanding that town and gown template. Well, what are the gale winds that you're facing? What you're looking at here is the gain in jobs and manufacturing by state. The gain in jobs in manufacturing by state from 2000 to 2011. Well, there are only 2 states that gained in that period. Only 2, North Dakota and Alaska. That's one of the gale winds, my friends, was the loss of manufacturing jobs across America. And so that's one of the gale winds. Adjusting to that, here's another one. These are the predictions in terms of college age people who might be enrolling in colleges and universities by regions of the United States. And if you're sort of east of the Mississippi River, as we are as we talk right here, it doesn't look all that good. So that's one of the gale winds as you think about your place in this industry that is an incredibly strong industry. And then there are these mass open online courses that are sort of everywhere now with low tuition or zero tuition. Marvelous things that are taking place out there, and people say, what's that going to do to us? We've had these kinds of things before. One of the first ones was called the book. The book. And then it became known as the library. Hey, you could go to the library and get a book and for free. And you could read and study that book, and you could learn principles of economics, or you could learn computer programming or French. You could get a college education for free. You just had to spend a lot of time in the library. They called it a book. So we've had this before. Then they had radio. When radio was first getting started in the United States, most of the radio stations were on college campuses. I graduated from a little liberal arts college down in Georgia, Mercer University. And Mercer was one of the first colleges to get a radio station, WMAZ. It is still operating. The call letters are Watch Mercer Attain Zeal. WGST, Georgia School of Technology. You go across the country, the radio stations were located on campus. Why did they want to have radio stations? We're going to be broadcasting our lectures to the dormitories, so the students won't even have to get out of their rooms. It's going to reduce having to hire all these faculty. We'll just get someone with a nice voice, and we'll just broadcast. We've had all this stuff before, but you always end up with human interaction. And so there will be more people who will have availability of knowledge, and that's marvelous. But the collaboration, the interaction, and so forth that requires human togetherness is still going to be there, and that's part of the challenge. But if you're not embracing all that stuff I just described, then look out for those online courses. Now here's another one. This is the result of the Industrial Revolution, if we want to call it that. What I'm showing you here is growth in state revenues by state. Now you see that real tall bar? Man alive, I've said this state's name several times, haven't I? That's North Dakota's revenue growth. And then you see that one that is very negative over there on the left? That's Alaska's revenue growth. What happened? The price of oil went down. When that one went up in North Dakota, it went down in Alaska. So I took those two bars out so that these others would become more visible. And when you take them out, that's what you get. And when you take them out, you see that 17 states in America have above average. 12 are showing revenue losses right now. Right now. And so it's not over, this business of scarcity, as we talk about the winds of change that are occurring. Now here's the end result of a lot of this. These are campuses that have closed, or colleges that have shuttered their doors. And I'm showing you data from 1990 through 2011. That's the winnowing process that is taking place. And it will continue to take place as these gales of difficulty are going to keep blowing and challenges for changes are there. And so as a result of these things, sometimes people in cities look over at the university and they say, wow, we got a sitting duck over there. Let's put a tax on tuition. Or let's put a head tax for every student. Let's see if we can't figure out a way to offset our losses in state revenues. Or if you're on the other side, if you're on the gown side, and you look over at this city and you say, hey, they've got fire trucks, they've got buses, they've got all kinds of services, they have police, let's just let them pick up the load on these things. And so there is that tendency to look at the other guy and say, wow, that grass really is green over on the other pasture. In preparing for this, I sent notes or made telephone calls to, I kicked that out, didn't I? Yeah. To presidents of universities and colleges. I contacted about 7 or 8. And I told them, look, I'm going to be talking at an International Town and Gown Association meeting. And if you were going to be making a presentation to that group, when you think about your college or your tech school or your 2-year college or your university, all that was in the sample, what would you say? And I got a neat message back, and it's in your notes, from the president of a university, a state university, a fairly good-sized one. I guess they probably have 18,000 students. He spent a lot of time with his answer, a lot of time, because he wrote me back and he said, that's such an important question, I got to spend some time on it. And I got back a page from him. I can summarize what he said. He says, if you're going to have successful town and gown relations, it requires being together continuously. Not just at football games, not just at athletic events, not just at ribbon cuttings, not just at the meeting you have every 6 weeks. It requires the president of the university to be at the Chamber of Commerce meetings regularly. It requires the president of the Chamber of Commerce to be at university meetings regularly. It requires the mayor to be on campus regularly. That was his point. Regularity, continuous engagement. Why? To build trust. And the bottom line was, it's not going to work unless you really believe in what you're trying to accomplish together. If you don't really believe, it's not going to work. And that was his advice to us. Now, let's talk about engaging the new economy in the minutes we have left, and the knowledge economy and so forth, thinking about where people work and how that has changed dramatically. Someone has identified what they consider to be the key attributes, the key human attributes for earning a living. And you start down at the bottom of this triangle, and it's also, this is sort of time phased. You start at the brute strength. It took brute strength to earn a living. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, my grandfather was a cotton farmer down in South Georgia, and he had 2 mules. They called it a 2-horse farm. But in that business, you didn't have horses, you had mules. It took brute strength to do what he did every day on that farm. My grandmother washed clothes in a black pot with fire under it out by the well with a big wooden paddle. She made her own soap. You could tell me your stories, and they would be like mine. Those people were tough as nails, tougher than leather. They could withstand anything. They had brute strength, and that's what it took. Well, as time passed, the next move was manual dexterity, being able to do things with your hands. That began to command the higher wages and the higher incomes. And then to be able to think abstractly, formulaic intelligence, to be able to understand an equation, to think abstractly, not so much physical strength or dexterity. Then as our economy has continued to evolve, we get to the point of analytical reasoning. And now the top piece in this story, human connectivity and creativity. This isn't engineering, this isn't economics, this isn't accounting, this isn't all that stuff that we have in our curricula, which may be wonderful. Well, how do you learn to connect with human beings? Well, maybe you get to be a part of a team in a marketing course, and you're going to make a presentation to the city council about how they can do a better job with their park. Or maybe you're an intern at a city and you're working with the city planner, and they have given you a task, and they say, by the way, the next time the planning committee meets, you will be the one who stands up and makes the presentation. How do you get those skills? By interacting with humans. And along these lines, I want to mention to you, it's been my experience, and I loved it and every minute of it, working with students. If you expect great things of them and treat them as adults and as professionals, they're just like everybody else. That's what you will tend to get. If you don't expect great things and you treat them like children, they will deliver more childlike behavior than you have ever seen in your life. But if you say, look, this is riding on your shoulders, and I don't have to tell you how you should dress or what you should look like, you already know that. So you're going to make the big presentation. You will be amazed at what happens. Now, the interesting thing about this triangle, I think, is that at any moment in time across our nation and through our towns and communities, every one of these attributes is at play. For example, if you go into a paper mill today, you will go down to the end of a paper machine and you will see big rolls of paper coming off, and I can assure you it takes brute strength to put in a day at that paper mill. It's still out there. Or if you go down to a cigar plant in Havana, Florida, you will see people working with manual dexterity. It takes manual dexterity. That's the ticket. Or if you go over to China and you go into the factory where they make iPhones, it looks just like that cigar factory. It's manual dexterity, and they sit there all day making those iPhones. But if you go to the top, what we have at the top, let me go back, is a woman talking to a robot. And the robot talking back. Well, now this is sort of a caricature of that, but that's really happening, folks. There are people out there engaging in conversations not just with other human beings, but with another computer, a brain and a computer. And in a sense, that's where we are now. This is the share of the U.S. population employed in agriculture. It has gotten to be such a small number of people that the census doesn't count them anymore. If I had told my grandfather about this, if I could have had a conversation with him, I was not alive in 1920, when 30% of the U.S. population was employed in production agriculture. But if I had told my grandfather that by the year 2000 there will be so few people farming that they won't count them anymore, I can expect that he would have said, people surely will be hungry, won't they? And then if I had told him, well, they say that people will be better fed than ever in history, they will be producing a surplus that goes to the rest of the world, and food will be cheaper than it is now, he would have said probably, he called me Buzz, Buzz, why don't you go out and feed the chickens? We got some work that needs to be done around here. It would have been impossible to conceive of. That's the share of the U.S. workforce employed in manufacturing. Looks just like that one. It just hasn't gotten there yet. And so we're producing more manufactured goods than ever in our history. We are exporting to the rest of the world. We're producing more at lower cost. It's just there are not as many people who work there. And so as you think about what you do in your school or what you're doing in your town, and if you think manufacturing is going to be the solution in terms of jobs and people and prospects, keep thinking. Because it will be partly, but it won't be what it used to be. When President Obama was running for office, re-election, he staged a number of photo ops, as is good to do, and this is one of them. He was walking through a factory up in Indiana, taking a tour with a fella, and I don't know what they were saying, but I'm guessing that Mr. Obama said, how are you doing in manufacturing? And I'm guessing this fellow said, to tell the truth, we're disintegrating. Now, disintegrating is a term of art. If you picture a plant that is fully integrated, it starts with the rawest of raw materials that comes in the back door, and out on the loading dock is a finished product. If the finished product is an automobile, coming in the back door is raw rubber so that you can make your tires, raw wood, which may be part of the floorboards or other components, iron ore, manganese, limestone, so that you can produce your steel, on and on. You get the idea. If you're fully integrated, you start with nothing and you produce something. If you disintegrate, then you say, well, I'm going to buy my steel from somebody else, I'll get my tires from somebody else, I'll get this from somebody else, or I'll build a plant up there in Spartanburg County, South Carolina, and I'll assemble BMW automobiles, but all the parts will come from somewhere else. We will assemble them. We will be disintegrated. And so as you disintegrate, you don't need as many people on the payroll at the factory, and this person may have been thinking, hardly anybody works here anymore. So, but they work somewhere, and that's the point of this. This is where people worked in the United States in 1970. 25% worked in manufacturing. I want you to focus on two pieces of pie down there. One is health and education, and the other one is professional and business services. Back in 1970, what is it? Health and education was 6%. Professional business services was 70%. Professional business services, that's computer programming. Those are the accountants. Those are all the professions other than the medical professions. That's law. That's purchasing. That's payroll services. That's human resources. All of that stuff. 7% of the workforce was employed there, 25% in manufacturing. And here's the most recent data for 2013, 9% in manufacturing. Huge growth in the others. And so the fact that no one is working in manufacturing, or very few are, doesn't mean that there are not people working for manufacturing. But it means it's a different skill set. Most manufacturers no longer have their own trucks and truck drivers. Most of them no longer have their own engineering departments and maintenance departments. A lot of them no longer have payroll. Those functions have been contracted out to another sector of the economy. And so when you think about your young people and where they may be heading and what can be done with town and gown relationships to gear up for the new economy, then the new economy is that one in professional services that would be rendered to all kinds of sectors, and that's going to call for engagement. And so the implications of that economy, I'm showing you here: manufacturing, employment, there's professional business services, put them together, and it's sort of flat out there. There's not any loss. We've got the growth. Now, a few other things, key words in my presentation that I want to leave you with, key words that we just touched on: explosive growth occurring in services and entrepreneurship, and that calls for a different experience for those underutilized students that can be provided by your town and your larger community. Small, highly fluid firms. If you want to see the cutting-edge firms, go down to Starbucks. Well, I go to McDonald's. The coffee's cheaper there. Go down to Starbucks or McDonald's in the morning and look around the room and see how many people you see with a cell phone and a laptop open, working. You may be seeing the CEO of an engineering consulting firm, or you may be watching a real estate salesperson. They are putting together deals. They don't have offices. If you say, well, I'd like to see you in your office, what's that? I don't have an office. Well, when do you go to work? What does that mean, go to work? I don't go to work. I don't have office hours. I work all the time. I might wake up at 2 in the morning and decide to get on my computer and send a message to my counterpart in Prague. And we'll set up a communication. That's the new world of communicating, of collaboration, of engagement. Other key words then: apprenticeships, internships, mentoring, and repackaging degree programs, repackaging functions in the town so that you can be more engaged. Now, there's one last thought I want to leave you with. We're out of time. I think we've got 5 more minutes. I'm talking at twice the speed I normally speak, and so I can slow down now and talk the way I normally speak. And all right, but as we think about things that go ahead, I wanted to end with a little bit of a story for you. Back a number of years ago, when I was a faculty member still, every faculty member at Clemson got a letter. This was back when you got letters from other parts of campus. No fax machines had been invented. There was no email. We got mail. Got a letter from the librarian. Everybody got that letter. And the librarian said, we're going to build a collection in the lobby of the library of professors' favorite books. Send us a note if you'd like to participate. Tell us your favorite book, what you consider to be the most important book to you. And we'll put it on the stack and we'll put a card, Professor Yandle's favorite book. And so I responded, said, hey, I'd like to be a part of that. Here's my favorite book. A few days later, in comes the mail again. I got a note from the librarian that said, I'm sorry, we don't have that book in our collection, but if you have a copy that you will lend to us, be happy to put it in. I wrote back, I have 2 copies. So I brought my favorite book, carried it over to the library, and they put it up in the stack. There was my favorite book. My favorite book, The Little Engine That Could, by Waddy Piper. And so there was The Little Engine That Could, sitting up top of all these other tomes and so forth. I got a call from a student. A few days later, he says, is this Professor Yandle? And I said, yes. And he said, what are you teaching next semester? And I told him, he says, well, it doesn't really matter. I just want to take your course. I just want to take your course. So anybody who's crazy enough to say that The Little Engine That Could is their favorite book, I just want to be around that person a little bit, and I'll decide whether you're crazy or not. Well, he didn't really say that. What's the point? What is the point of The Little Engine That Could? And by the way, the little engine is female. If you haven't read that book in a while, dig it out and get a niece or a nephew or a grandchild or a child. If you want to make this world a better place, get that child on your knee and read that book about the little engine. What's the message? What's the message as we think about Town and Gown, as we think about these challenges, as we think about ideas that you take back with you to make it better? What's the message in the little engine that could? Let me hear you say it. What is it? I can't hear you. What is it? Can you say that louder? I think I can stop. Thank you so much for your kind attention.